This episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Tom Wilson and what does he mean to this Washington Capitals team. We talk about the injuries that he's facing with his knee. Is there any risk that he won't come back in the fall? We'll talk about all of that and more next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check that out. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this episode, that's what we're going to talk about primarily is Tom Wilson and what does he mean to this Washington Capitals team. His presence was missed during the playoffs for the most part. He sustained an injury in the first game of the playoffs against the Panthers. And one has to really start to kind of think, would the Washington Capitals have won more games, or would they have even made it past round one if Tom Wilson was playing? We'll talk about that in this show. But that is the biggest question, I guess, is just looking at Tom Wilson and his career and how he has kind of a bad rap around the league as to who he is. You know, a lot of people just revere him as just this goon, this tough guy. But he is a player that is a legitimate goal scorer, 20-plus goals scored this year. And, I mean, that doesn't happen to just any player. That doesn't happen to Ryan Reeves, for example. Tom Wilson with 24 goals and 28 assists on the season. So that's what I'm talking about. He is maturing and he's kind of finding his way through this whole NHL process. I think that, to a certain extent in the beginning of his career, he was a little rough around the edges. He would engage in fights with most anyone. But then I think he had a really great mentor in the form of Alex Ovechkin, someone to kind of show him the ropes and kind of tell him, hey, Tom, you don't need to engage in fights with everyone. Just you got to kind of pick your battles. I mean, if you take a look at Alex Ovechkin, the last time he dropped the gloves was against Svechnikov in 2019. And there were many opportunities for Alex Ovechkin to get into fights, but he found a way to rise above. And I think, that is what Tom Wilson is doing. Wilson made his NHL debut in 2013, making the Capitals roster for the 13-14 season as a raw physical presence who would develop into a top six forward with experience and was a critical piece to the Washington Capitals 2018 Stanley Cup championship team. And that's a big thing about Tom Wilson. And if you think about just, the intangibles of his play, just how he has that physical game, but he also has that great goal-scoring touch. Dare I say that maybe the Washington Capitals may have not won the Stanley Cup in 2018 if it wasn't for someone like Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson is a bit of a four-leaf clover. There's not a lot of him in the league. And if you ask any of the 32 teams or 31 other teams other than the Washington Capitals, they would love to have someone like Tom Wilson in their lineup. Just that big physical presence, that intimidator, the kind of guy that's out there that's going to say, no, you're not going to treat our players like that. You're not going to run over our goalie, or you're not going to take advantage of our rookie. But then the flip side of the coin is that he can also score really great goals. In 9 NHL seasons, 646 games played, 115 points, 158 assists, and 273 points. Wilson has produced 40-plus points and 20-plus goals in 2 of the past 3 seasons. Wilson's tenure in Washington began in Washington when he signed his 3-year entry-level contract. The forward didn't receive a long-term deal when his rookie contract was up. Instead, the Capitals provided him with a $2 million contract extension bridge contract in 2016. After the bridge contract was up, the Capitals didn't hesitate in committing long-term to Tom Wilson, giving him a 6-year contract in 2018. And I think if it's one of the things that the Washington Capitals will look back on is a wise decision that they didn't let him get away. I think that the temptation, to a certain extent throughout his career might have been to let him go. And what do I mean when I say that is I think that, When he first came into the league, I think that people kind of saw him as a liability. He was the guy that was getting in fights all the time. He was the guy that spent all the time in the penalty box. He was the player that got suspended all the time. And, his play was sometimes detrimental to the Washington Capitals and the outcomes. Suffices to say, I think that the Washington Capitals may have won some of the games that Tom Wilson was involved in when he was suspended or spent most of the time in the penalty box. But throughout the years, he has found a way to mature with age. I think that happens to everyone. But like I say, with Alex Ovechkin and a mentor with him, he just kind of saw that, I don't need to drop the gloves with everyone. I don't need to drop the gloves with these fourth-line players, these AHL players that are just trying to make a name for themselves. I can rise above. I don't need to get involved with that. And that's what we're really starting to see from Tom Wilson is just this maturity over time. About the reputation, Wilson has never played more minutes per game than he did this season, 18.35 a night. Part of it is being smarter. In 47 games of last year's pandemic-shortened season, Wilson racked up 96 penalty minutes, leading the NHL in the category for the first time. This season, in 78 games, he logged only 98 minutes in the box, a drop from more than 2 minutes per night to 1 minute to 15 seconds. So that's what I'm talking about. He's just kind of learning from his mistakes. As I talked to JJ Regan about it, and I knew this as much, is that, when you look at a guy like that's a tough guy, you assume that he's probably not too bright. That is not the case with Tom Wilson. He's actually very intelligent. He makes great plays, and he's able to change his play. Some of these people, some of these players, they have a reputation, and they're not willing to change. They're not willing to adapt. If you take a look at Tom Wilson, what has he done? He's kind of, like I say, walked away from fights, and he's really kind of refined his game. He's, scoring a ton of goals out there for the Washington Capitals, and I really look forward to seeing what he can bring next year. He's always learning. He's always been a guy that's played really physical, and any team in the league would love to have players like that, like Tom, who's big and strong and can score goals, and he can hit and he can fight, and everything he does is power, Peter Laviolette said last season on 106.7 The Fan Sports Junkies. And, that's what I'm saying. A four-leaf clover is what Tom Wilson is. Rarely do you find a guy that has both those attributes, someone that can fight, someone that, finishes his check, someone that maybe plays a little over the edge, but he can also score when called upon. He can answer the bell when he needs to. I don't think the last 2 or 3 years I've had much of a different mentality, Wilson explained. My game's kind of changed over the years, and more recently, kind of this year, I think this league, you have to improve every offseason. You have to be improving. You have to be taking on more responsibility because there's so many great players that you can't get complacent. You can't get comfortable. You just have to keep demanding the best from yourself and pushing yourself forward. And that's something I've tried to do every day since I've been in the league. And I think that that's noticeable with him, that he is always trying to better himself. He's not complacent with mediocrity. He's always trying to push himself to the next level. And that's why I'm hoping, he is facing that injury to his knee. It was an injury that was sustained in game 1 of the playoffs against the Florida Panthers. It was one where he was trying to check someone into the boards and he ended up hitting himself into the boards. And, that was just a real unfortunate situation. But, from listening to the different players, the different coaching staff, that kind of thing, it makes him sound like, he may need surgery. But as of right now, it's not confirmed that, in fact, he will need surgery. So let's just really hope that Tom Wilson can make, a full recovery. That is the last thing that we need with the inconsistency on this team is to go into next season unsure of the future, unsure if Tom Wilson's going to be in the lineup. Like I say, this team is facing a rebuild. We do not need someone like Tom Wilson out of the lineup. So after the break, I told you what I thought of Tom Wilson and, what some of the coaches have thought of him. But after the break here, I'm going to talk to you about what some of his fellow teammates think of him. But first, Built Bar. I love brownies, but you know what I love more? Brownie batter. Sometimes I eat half the batter just while I'm making the brownies. Imagine if you can lick the brownie spatula clean and get some protein in. You're in luck because Built has a new creation, and this one is better than ever, the Brownie Batter Puff. You heard me right. This puff takes protein bars to a whole new level, and they're available right now at Built.com. Have you tried the Built Puffs yet? I'm sure Not sure what you're waiting for? Puffs are a chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar. That's right, delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% chocolate. With 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 7 grams of sugar, Brownie Batter Puffs are the perfect pick-me-up for any day. All Built bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And they are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of healthy benefits. The Brownie Batter Puffs have you completely forgetting that you're eating a protein bar. No need to pinch yourself. This is real life. So go to Built.com to get Brownie Batter Puffs now. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen. For your next listen, check out Locked On Now podcasts, nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So in this second segment, we are going to talk about what do the other players think of Tom Wilson. I know that what a lot of people around the league, they like to say, and I think it's primarily just jealousy that they don't have someone like that on their team, is that he's a goon. He's a tough guy. That's all he is. He's a one-dimensional player. Players that can score 20-plus goals in any given season consistently, I would definitely not call just goons or tough guys. They're legitimate goal scorers. John Carlson on Tom Wilson here. Don't think the last 2 or 3 years I've had much of a different mentality, Wilson explained. This is what he was thinking on. He means so much to our team in that he plays on the penalty kills, plays on the power play, plays at the end of games, down and up. He plays a lot of minutes for us. There are very few times where I could ever say that I want him in the penalty box for 5 minutes. I think that some of his growth, too, is from within himself. I'm sure he always wants to answer the bell. That's kind of who he is, but he means a heck of a lot more in other areas. And I think that, intrinsically, that's who Tom Wilson is he's a tough guy. He's a guy that wants to fight you if you mess with him or if you mess with his teammates. So, but, I think that, like they say, you can't teach a dog new tricks. I think that you can in certain cases. If you take a look at Tom Wilson, he's been in the league for some time, and I think that he has found a way to overcome. He's not the guy that's getting mixed up in the corner all the time. He is a legitimate goal scorer, and he is making great plays. Incorporate more versatility into his game while striking a balance between the tough guy persona and a skill slayer. So that is what they were talking about in that article as well, is that, he can be both of those. He can be that tough guy if you need him to be, but he's a multidimensional player. Everybody knows I'll try and have their back and do everything I can to help them win. So that's kind of always been my focus. Every game is very different. It can be a complete skill game with no hitting, or it can be a game where there's tons of hitting and fights and all of that, Wilson explained. In each individual game, I try to adapt and be versatile as I can to get these 2 points and help push the team in the right direction. So it's not an individual mindset or anything like that I focus on too much. It's just falling back on my experience and trying to stay versatile and continue to contribute. And I think that he's done that. And I think that that is one of the unfortunate things about this season is that, he played really solid all year. And then he was facing those injuries. He smashed his knee against there, and he tried to skate around a little bit after the fact, but the damage was already done. And if you heard from Brian McClellan, as it turns out, there was never any real possibility that he would have returned. So I don't know. That was one of those situations that I had talked about. If they knew for in fact that Tom Wilson was out and that there was really no chance of him playing in the series, why didn't you just come out and say he's out? I don't know if that was, to try to foil the plans of the Florida Panthers, try to, like say they couldn't plan for what the Capitals were going to do next. But it just seemed kind of, foolish to me that they didn't just say, Tom Wilson is out. He's not going to play. But that's not what ended up happening. And, like I was talking about earlier in the podcast, it really makes you think what could have been, what could have happened in this series, this Washington Capitals team, this aging roster, with Tom Wilson in the lineup. Could he Could he have been the one that led the charge? Could he have been the one that brought the physical presence? Like I was talking about earlier, that, the physical game in that series against Florida was pretty much absent. How much could that have changed if you had someone like Tom Wilson out there, just that wrecking ball out there, just taking care of business to kind of clear the lane for someone like Alex Ovechkin, and Kuznetsov out there, and I think that is really where Tom Wilson excels, is on that top line. I know they have tinkered with it here and there. They put Shiri up there. They put Mantha up there, but the best first line for the Washington Capitals, in my opinion, Alex Ovechkin, Nick Backstrom, and Tom Wilson. You have the best of both worlds. You have Nick Backstrom tying it down, being the great center, dishing the puck to Alex Ovechkin. But with someone like Tom Wilson, you have that intimidation factor out there that's kind of clearing the lane. But you can also kind of mix it up and dish the puck to Tom Wilson, who's not afraid of scoring pucks either. So that's what I'm talking about. Next year, I think that is one of the secret sauce ingredients for the Washington Capitals, is to put Tom Wilson back on that top line, as long as he's not injured, of course. And that's what we're really hoping for, because, like I say, there's changes coming to the Washington Capitals, and the last thing that we need is to have Tom Wilson out of the lineup. We've had inconsistency in net. The last thing we need is to have Tom Wilson out of the lineup. All right, so after the break here, we are going to talk a little bit about Alex Ovechkin. Alex Ovechkin says he is changing his off-season training. What is that all about? We'll talk about that next. All right, welcome back. In this final segment here, we are going to talk about Alex Ovechkin. Alex Ovechkin, who had a milestone season, breaking goals left and right out there. And the real tragedy of it was that the Washington Capitals did not move past that first round. They didn't make it into the second round. They did not make it to the Stanley Cup. And, this is the roster that we hear about. It's win now. The window's closing, but it's open now. They got to win now. You hear all these cliches thrown all over the place. But that is who it's most tragic for, is the captain of the team, Alex Ovechkin, because he knows, I think that Father Time is coming for us all, and who knows how much time he has. Who knows how much time any of us have, really. But that is the really unfortunate aspect. I would say the true tragedy is primarily for Alex Ovechkin. He is breaking all kinds of records. He did his level best. He was the guy that was out there that was kind of leading the charge when there was no physicality out there. He was the one that was like, you know what? I'm going to be the one that takes the bull by the horns. I'm going to bring the physical presence. Because I don't know if that was Peter Laviolette that was dialing in a weaker game or what it was, but this was not the identity of the Washington Capitals, to kind of play soft. And that's kind of how they played the first few games. And that's when Alex Ovechkin stepped in. In this article here in A Russian Machine Never Breaks, they talk about Alex Ovechkin and how he is kind of changing his workout routine. Working out, if you take a look at someone like Tom Brady or any of these guys, working out when you're older is even more important. In this article he was talking about, he says, I think we need, when we start preparation at the end of June, Ovechkin said, per Google Translate, we will work gradually, and then we will fruitfully approach the training process in July and August. For the 21-22 campaign, Ovechkin said, I started in mid-July, and now it will almost be a month earlier. And you got to think about that, he wants to be in top form. And, that's one of the things you'll say about Alex Ovechkin, is he is not the kind of guy that mails it in. If you ever see the videos of him, he has an extensive workout to be in the condition that he's in, and to compete at a high level this late in his career. That's what you need to do. You need to be in optimal condition, because, I don't think it's so much even about the Capitals and what they do anymore. It's him chasing Gretzky. And I know that he would probably say otherwise, but I mean, that's a pretty big goal, and it's a lofty goal, and it's one that he should chase. The Capitals captain was cryptic when asked why. I want to change something, he said. In the past 5 years, we have observed Ovechkin have a CrossFit-esque training regimen that includes off-ice workouts like running and bike riding. He also has done creative exercises to keep things fresh. In the last 2 seasons, Ovechkin has struggled with injury. As the playoffs began against the Panthers, Ovi admitted he was dealing with a shoulder issue after slamming into the boards weeks earlier. The year before, he was nursing a lower body injury against the Bruins. It's not a secret that I hit the board. I hit my shoulder, Ovechkin said in the playoffs. I don't think it did matter. If it hurts you, you have some injections, you have some magic pill. And, that's the hard part, with a professional athlete, is that, in most people in life, if you're injured, well, then you're like, well, I need to take a break because I'm injured. But, when you're a professional athlete performing on the level that Alex Ovechkin is performing on, as you're the captain of the team, and I think that he kind of has the weight of the world on his shoulders out there. Like, if this Capitals team is going to win, it's going to be with me on the ice. And you really can't argue with that. But the important part is that it seems Ovechkin is as motivated as ever despite 4 consecutive first-round exits in the playoffs. The future Hall of Famer is 20 goals short of 800 career goals and trails only Gordie Howe and Wayne Gretzky on the NHL's all-time goals list. Ovi has 4 years remaining on a 5-year contract extension he signed this last summer. And, that's one of the things is, people have talked about, is he going to finish his career with the Capitals or is he going to go back home for one last season? And, I guess I really couldn't blame him, but, 5 years from now, he's going to be up there in age. But I guess that, that remains to be seen on what he chooses to do, because I think that ultimately Alex Ovechkin can do whatever he wants to do. But you got to think that he's going to chase that goal wholeheartedly. Because just to be in the same breath as Gordie Howe and Wayne Gretzky, what an accomplishment! But there is no guy out there that deserves it more than Alex Ovechkin. Just that, like I say, he wears the weight of the world on his shoulders. That's why he's doing all this extensive workout and doing all these other things, is because he knows that if this Capitals team is to succeed, it's going to be with him, at the helm. It's going to be him that is going to help the Capitals over the top. Because if you ever take a look at the stretches of time when Ovechkin isn't in the lineup, the Capitals definitely don't play as well. And it's not necessarily just the goal scoring. I'm talking about his leadership. You don't get to a point where you are the captain of the team, just by being not respected by your players, not being a leader. Alex Ovechkin is definitely a leader on that team, and that's who they need going forward. And I'm glad that he's, taking the initiative to really take care of himself, because we need him to play as long as possible. And like I say, Tom Brady's the same way. As you get older, especially with these players, you've got to work out. You've got to push yourself if you want to have any longevity in the National Hockey League. And that's what he's doing, and that's a positive sign. I just hope this Capitals team makes the changes that they need to make in the offseason so they can be competitive once again. All right, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL, from first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from our local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, and I'll talk to you next time.